Hey, let's go ahead and get started. Thanks for being here today. I'm Bill Keffer. I'm here at the law school and director of our energy law programs, of which one of our programs is the Energy Law Lecture Series, and this is the first installment of the Energy Law Lecture Series for the spring semester. So those of you who have been to previous lectures, kind of know the drill, but if you're here for the first time, thanks for joining us. We'll have two more of these throughout the semester. So let me tell you those dates and names. You can find this on the school website as well. And if you are either a member of Energy Law Interest Group or the Journal of the Energy Law Practitioner, you should have access to this information as well. The next program will be on Monday, March 2nd, and that will be Courtney Yaltman, who is one of the 5 commissioners on the Public Utility Commission of Texas in Austin. So those are the guys who sort of run the electric grid and deal with ERCOT and make sure the lights come on and that sort of thing. So she is one of the 5 PUC commissioners. She will be here on Monday, March 2nd. And then our final speaker in this series will be on Monday, April 13th, and that will be Dean Foreman. Dean is with the Texas Oil and Gas Association in Austin. So you might want to mark your calendars for those 2 dates as well. But thanks for being with us today. A couple other housekeeping announcements. One is, you see up on the screen, the QR code for CLE credit with the State Bar. So if you're a practicing lawyer here in the room, you can use that QR code on your phone and it'll automatically register you for 1 hour CLE for today. And then if you're on Zoom, joining us by Zoom today, thanks for joining us, but also this QR code's there for you as well. It'll be there at the end of today's program as well. So if you're not ready to grab the QR code right now, you can get it at the end. And then finally, for my students who are in my Oil and Gas 1 class or my Oil and Gas 2 class, I have the attendance sheets down front. If you haven't already signed in, please make sure you do, because the only way you get credit for being here is if you sign in on that attendance sheet. So be sure and do that before you leave today as well. Okay, so let me introduce you to our guest speaker today. This is a great honor for me to have him here. I've heard about him for a long time. He's been in the legislature in Austin a long time, and he's, this part of the world out here in West Texas, the Panhandle, South Plains, and I just haven't had the opportunity to have him come speak yet, and this worked out really well to have him come today. Our guest speaker is Representative Ken King. He has served in the Texas House of Representatives since January 2013. I guess that means you're finishing up your 7th term. Is that right? And he's on the ballot in March in the primary. And if he makes it through there, then in November for the general to see if he can go down there and serve an 8th term. He is based out of Canadian, which of course is up in the Panhandle. He is currently representing 19 counties that sort of cover the Panhandle and South Plains. He serves as chairman of the House State Affairs Committee and chairman of the House Select Committee on Disaster Preparedness and Flooding. Prior to his election to the legislature, he served more than 5 years on the Canadian Independent School District Board of Trustees and on the County Appraisal District Executive Board for Hemphill County for more than 4 years. He's a native of Canadian and is president of Black Gold Pump and Supply, which is an oil field supply service company. And he's here to talk about wildfire mitigation, specifically that smokehouse wildfire from a couple of years ago that was so devastating up in the Panhandle, but also to just talk to us generally about his career and a little bit of a legislative update. It's just great to have him here. Give him a warm welcome. This is Representative Ken King.
Well, thank you for being here. Thanks for having me. Before I get started, I'd be remiss if I didn't introduce my wife. Bubba, stand up, wave everybody. She hates that part. But it's always good to have her with me. I have to make a lot of miles. So House District 88 that I serve in is the largest district in the state. It's 19 counties. Just last week, we topped 1,800 miles and never left the district. And this week will be the same because it's campaign time. I'll give you a little bit of my background. I want to talk to you today about a little bit about my background and my work experience in the oil and gas industry, but also we are going to hit the wildfire thing pretty hard and then I want to give time, and hopefully you'll have some questions for me. So I was born and raised in Canadian. I'm a Panhandle boy. People say, how long have you lived in Canadian? Well, you can't get more Panhandle than I do. The same doctor delivered my mother. So we have a lot of history around that town. My family's original business was called King Drilling Company, and it started in Liberal, Kansas in 1959, and it migrated to the Panhandle, and that company is still in existence today. My grandfather started it. My dad took it over about the year I was born, and I took it over in the late 90s. But we also have a company called Black Gold Pump and Supply, it's an oil field supply store. We do a lot of commercial real estate and some residential. And we have a ranching operation where we raise 3 different herds of cattle. Robert and I have been raising bucking bulls for 25 years. I was a rodeo cowboy. I was never going to, actually, I wasn't even going to go to school because I had it all planned out. It turned out I wasn't that good at being a bull rider, so I had to go to college. And so then we started raising them as well. So I graduated. I went to school on a rodeo scholarship and to a little school in southeastern Oklahoma. Then I went to southeastern Oklahoma, and then I graduated from Southern Nazarene in Bethany, Oklahoma. And I went there because, number one, I had a full ride to go rodeo, but I changed my permanent residence. So I was going to have to pay out-of-state tuition to come back and finish up once I was done rodeoing. And Robin is a nurse by trade, and she was going to school in Amarillo, and as close as I could get to her was Oklahoma City. So that's my education story. I graduated from Southern Nazarene University with a business degree. And when I got out of college, of course, I had an oil field background. I grew up in it, particularly with service companies. When I got out of college, I had a choice. I could go to work for an insurance company or a bank or something like that and wear a suit every day and starve to death, or I could go get a job. And I took a job with a company out of El Dorado, Kansas that manufactured drilling rigs. And so they called me an international service technician. They sent me all over the world. And that is code for mechanic. That's what I was. I just busted wrenches. That was what I did, but I made triple the money I would have made with my degree. And then it came time to have a family. And the town I ran away from as fast and as hard as I could 8 years sooner looked like a pretty good place to raise our kids. So Robin and I moved home. I started working in our family business. We've started some other businesses through the years and all that. So I think I guess I should talk a little bit about why I ran for office. So in a small town, I was on the ballot to be a school board member, but you don't really run for election in those things. They're really more appointed. It's hard to get people to step up and do those jobs. And I happened to be on the school board. They made me president of the board, and that was because I missed a meeting. Well, while I was president, we did a thing called a tax swap. And so if you know anything about school finance, you have property wealthy districts and you have property poor districts. So the property wealthy district, they send part of their taxable value to Austin. It gets reallocated to the poor districts. Canadian at the time was in a real boom. We had $7 to $9 natural gas prices from about 2001 to 2009. Well, when 2009 happened, we got two things. Barack Obama got elected, and we got $2 natural gas. When you're used to living off of $9 to $11 natural gas, that's a big hit. My school board was going to lose 2/3 of its taxable value. So we go to the legislature and we asked permission to do a tax swap. Essentially what we said is we want to take our tax rate from 88 cents to 20 cents for 1 year without a rollback election. That would allow us to keep our money and tell Robin Hood to stick it for 1 year and pay all our bond debt off early. We had all the accolades from the speaker at the time, the lieutenant governor, the governor, Texas Education Agency wrote us letters about how fiscal responsible we were and more school districts should be forward thinking. Until 10 months after the fact, TEA called me as president of the board of Canadian and said, "Oh, yeah, that letter, throw that thing away. You violated a 1993 law we didn't know about, and you owe $4 million you didn't tax for." Would have wiped out my school district's fund balance. So I spent about a year playing chicken with TEA, because the way school law works is if you're a property wealthy district and you don't pay your Robin Hood payment, what the statute says is TEA shall detach your most valuable property first and reallocate it. No mechanism in the law to ever get that property back. So in a county like Hemphill, where 96% of all taxes paid are paid by non-county residents, oil companies, they're going to take that oil and gas property and send the tax revenue to another county, and we can never get it back. So I spent the 2011 session arguing this point. Stealing's wrong. Even if it's from a rich district, the state shouldn't be able to steal your money. Nobody would listen to me because what happened was we actually had $2 natural gas. The comptroller at the time falsely valued natural gas for 2 years, led to a $26 billion shortfall. During the 2011 session, the legislature cut public school funding $5.5 billion. Nobody was giving any love to a property wealthy district. So I'm standing in the Capitol in the office that actually is next door to the office I occupied today. My predecessor was in that office. He was retiring, or he was running for Railroad Commission. He was leaving the House. And I told my colleagues, that were my fellow board members and my superintendent, I don't even know where the bathroom is in this place. But one thing I've learned about the legislature is that unless one of us has a seat out there, we're never getting that money back. And I drew the short straw. So I ran for the legislature. And I told Robin, I said, I'm going to run for the Texas House. She said, no, you're not. And then I should have listened to her because I've been there for a while now. But I ran to get the money back. The plan was Ken's going to beat this incumbent. He's going to go to the legislature. He's going to get the $4 million back for Canadian ISD. And then he's going to come home and go back to work in his business, and this will all be over. And all of that happened except leaving the legislature. I stayed. Why did I stay? I learned a lot. I got the money back, by the way, in my first session. But one thing I did learn is, particularly in public ed, West Texas and rural Texas was so underrepresented. That committee had been, for 30 years, had not had a rural member set on it. So all public ed policy was getting set in Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, the places like that. Had nothing to do with where we live. So I ended up on the public ed committee. While I was on there, I really thought, okay, I came from school board, public ed's all right, but I'm going to work on oil and gas issues. I'm going to work on transportation issues. I'm going to work on all these things that matter to my business that I think I know something about, until my mother died. My mother died of ovarian cancer. And ovarian cancer is a really hard cancer to diagnose. We don't know a lot about it. And Robin and I got really motivated to figure this out. One of my best friends in the legislature, his mother died of ovarian cancer at exactly the same time mine did. And we created a foundation that is the KK125 Ovarian Cancer Research Foundation. And its mission is early detection and patient advocacy. We've raised well over $1 million for specific research, but I was able to use this position to change the law. So one of the things that happened back then, we've been curing breast cancer in this state for years and years and years, but we're not curing ovarian cancer because we don't have early detection. The KK125 is a play on words. We found out that a blood test called a CA125 back in those days was the only early detection mechanism for ovarian cancer. Had my mother had a CA125 4 years before she was diagnosed, likely she would have lived. It's curable, it's certainly treatable, but the horse was out of the barn by the time we knew that. Why was nobody taking a CA125? Insurance companies. Now, I know you guys are all aspiring lawyers, and you're going to hear horrible jokes your entire life about lawyers. All of that disdain should be aimed at insurance companies, because if it wasn't for the corrupt insurance business, from healthcare to property and casualty, you wouldn't have a job. 90% of the lawsuits you'll ever deal with is because an insurance company denied claim. Insurance companies got on this kick of telling women, you're going to have a partial hysterectomy because we'll pay for one snip, but we're not going to pay for two. Insurance companies refused to offer a woman a CA125 as part of a well-woman exam as an insurable item. In 2015, I had the opportunity to pass an insurance mandate, and I forced the insurance industry to offer every woman in the state of Texas a CA125 as an insurable item. Now, this is a big deal. I'm a Republican. We don't do mandates. Governor Abbott was a new governor. He signed it. He signed an insurance mandate and made a CA 125 part of a well-woman exam during that time. I've been able to expand on that law since I've been in the legislature. And today, what I've changed the law to say now is whether it's not just ovarian cancer, any test, male or female, that your doctor deems necessary for early detection of any cancer, the insurance company has to pay for it. I couldn't have done that if I hadn't been in this seat. That's one of the things I'm most proud of in my time in the legislature. The other thing I did is I changed the right to try law. You know, if you're in a right to try situation, the law used to say that you could only be prescribed a medicine that fit your diagnosis, and the FDA had to go through 3 phases of the FDA before that medicine is available. Ovarian cancer is a good example. Most of the researchers will tell you they think breast cancer and ovarian cancer are the same cancer because the cells look the same. My mother could not take a breast cancer drug because it was against the law in Texas. Now, how stupid is that? But what I did is I changed the law and I said, any drug your doctor wants to prescribe you that is phase 1 approved, you can take it. This past session, I was able to expand the right to try law again to say any healthcare program your doctor designs for you using your own DNA, you can take it without government interference. You don't have to ask anymore. That's medical freedom. That's good stuff. Now, I only tell you this because God works in mysterious ways. I was going to be the transportation guy, the oil and gas guy, and I've been all that. I still do all that. But I got put in a position, and I know one of the things that I think is kind of funny to me, because I'm a redneck from Canadian Texas, and, we're just oil field trash up there. But I'm known in Austin as being the #1 advocate for women's health care. Nobody saw that coming. It's exciting to me that I've been able to use that position to do some stuff because here's the thing. Nobody lasts down there forever. Mr. Keffer was down there for a while. If you go down and find his picture on the composite in the basement, his picture's yellow because of the fluorescent lights, not because he was yellow. We're all going to be a yellow picture in the basement. And that's fine. Nobody should do these jobs forever, right? That's not my seat. It belongs to House District 88. But while I'm there, I'm a policy-oriented legislator, and I believe in doing stuff that's going to change Texans' lives for the better. And I just happen to be in the right position to do something, #1, to honor my mother and her memory, but do something for my wife, my daughter, my sisters, my nieces, every woman in this room. And so that's fun to me. I like to do that those kind of things. So, anybody know the difference in a politician and a statesman? So I really do hate politicians. And I don't like to be called one because a politician is somebody who fabricates a problem so they can pretend to solve it to get your vote 2 years from now. A statesman is somebody that identifies a problem and takes a hold of it and solves it and doesn't care who gets the credit. I am nothing if I don't work diligently to be known as a statesman. I don't like politicians. I don't like fake problems. I like to take on real problems. And I don't know how much y'all know about the legislative process and how you actually pass a bill in that place. It's very, very difficult. And it should be. Because nobody wants more laws. Nobody has ever said to me, can I vote for you because you made my life harder? No, it should be hard to pass a bill. And you have all these people that come down there, like this last session, 9,000 bills were filed, which means they didn't all get a hearing and they certainly didn't all pass. But does anybody really believe that there's 9,000 good ideas in Austin, Texas? Absolutely not. So I chair the State Affairs Committee, which is the largest committee in the whole place, and House or Senate. It catches more bills, has more purview than any other committee. What it's really designed for is it takes care of all the law dealing with ERCOT, PUC, a lot of oil and gas stuff, nuclear energy, the power grid overall. Any major policy that affects the state of Texas comes through my committee. But it also does all the social justice bills. What is a woman? You know, we had to define what is a woman this time. 100 years ago, we had a lot of farmers and ranchers around here. Nobody needed a definition. Now we have to have a definition. That's the kind of stuff I have to work on. But that committee is important. And here's why it's so important, particularly to our part of the state. The way the hierarchy works, you have the speaker, then obviously you have the appropriations chair because he controls the money, and you have state affairs. So in the hierarchy, the top two in the hierarchy are both from here. There's no substitute, because when you get in the legislative process, it's the budget, the budget, the budget. That's what you're talking about. We had a $338 billion budget this time. All but about 6% was already spoken for before we got there. 6% is what everybody's fighting over. I was able to leverage my position with the help of my friend Speaker Burrows to get about $3 billion of that 6% discretionary funding just in my district. Not to mention what we pulled off for Texas Tech, what we pulled off we passed a farm bill for the first time in 40 years. We passed a rural health care bill that's going to put billions of dollars into our small hospitals. That all happened because leadership was on our side of the state this time. So when you get in the legislative process, first thing you need to know is the Constitution only requires you to do two things. You have to have a balanced budget. It has to be certified by the comptroller every session, and we have to fund public education. Nothing else. There's not one more thing in that Constitution that we have to do. So the balanced budget amendment, the way it works is $338 billion this biennium. We don't have $338 billion. Texas has a AAA bond rating. So Texas fills its coffers in three ways. We fill our coffers with sales tax. We fill our coffers with fine fees and permits, and then severance tax, which is severance tax is oil and gas. It's the tax that oil and gas royalty owners and oil companies pay for oil that is severed from the ground. That's where Texas gets its money. So we pass a budget, $338 billion. Our comptroller certifies it. The comptroller then goes around the country selling AAA bonds. We fill our coffers up. Tax revenue comes in over the biennium. We pay it off and we start again. That's the first thing we do every session because it's a constitutional mandate. So when you file one of these 9,000 bills, the way it works, so I file a bill, and you guys would probably be better at reading a bill than me because it's all legalese. You know, it's lots of these and thous, and it's kind of confusing. So when you file a bill or draft a bill, you send it to Legislative Council. Legislative Council is a group of first-year law graduates, usually 23 to 27 years old, and they draft your bill. They take your idea and they put it in legal form. Now, you better read it because these are people, and a lot of them have an agenda, and a lot of times you'll get your bill back, and it does exactly the opposite of what you think it does. So that's first. You get your bill draft, you sign off on it, you file it with the clerk. Then it goes to the speaker. Speaker refers it to the appropriate committee, 33 standing committees in the Texas House, of which I chair 2 of them. Your bill goes to committee. So then you go ask the chairman of that committee or chairwoman, can I have a hearing? And if they grant you a hearing, you go lay your bill out and then you go back and you ask all the members of the committee, will you vote for it? Then it takes a stop in the calendars process. Calendars is just that. It sets the calendar. After a bill passes committee, it's got to go to calendars. So it gets a chance to die there too. So then you kind of bug the calendars committee to get your bill on the floor. And then once you get it on the floor, 149 other members have 2 chances to kill it. So it's complicated. And so if you pass a bill, no matter what the bill does, whether it's a big bill, little bill, whatever, process is the same. And it's very, very difficult to pass one because of what I said. There's not 9,000 good ideas. We don't need more laws. My very first session, I was fortunate. I filed 12 bills, and the governor signed 12 bills of mine. I don't know anybody else that's ever had 100% record in that process. It wasn't me. I approach the legislature just like I do my business. I'm never the smartest guy in the room, but I make sure that guy's working for me. And that's how you get through the legislative process. Whether it's House or Senate, it all has to go through the same process. The very first bill I ever passed, I told it was an education bill. It allowed schools to use basically, well, you call it FaceTime now, it's Skype back then, for rural schools to partner with big schools to have classes that you couldn't have in other schools as a technology bill. Well, back then, if you were a Republican and anybody said voucher, you couldn't be a Republican. It's not like today. Now we have to have a voucher. You can't be a Republican. I'm not sure when that shifted, but 10 years ago, good Republicans weren't for vouchers. So I have this bill, and I'm so proud of it because I worked my tail off to get it through the House. And I was so naive to the process. When I finally get my bill passed on the House floor, I mean, I survived a 2.5-hour floor debate. It was a big deal. And all my buddies, my new friends, are going, congratulations, man, that's great. You did a good job. I said, wonderful. They said, who's carrying it in the Senate? I said, what do you mean? They said, well, you got to pass it in the Senate too. I said, well, shit, nobody told me that. So I go over and I get a senator to carry it. And, you don't know what you don't know in that process. So while the bill was being debated in the Senate and all these people were trying to kill it, I go over there and Blaine Brunson, who was Lieutenant Governor Dewhurst's chief of staff, came and got me. Now, the thing you've got to know about the legislative process, the Senate is stuffy. They're very stuffy. They're very proud of themselves. They're senators, after all. So for a House member to go over there, it's kind of, they consider it your privilege to be in their presence. So I'm over there in their presence. A House member, especially a freshman House member, does not set foot on the Senate dais. I get invited to the Senate dais by the Lieutenant Governor. All of my buddies are over in the House seeing this on TV going, what the heck's Ken doing up there? And while I'm up there, he's lecturing me about a transportation bill. And this transportation bill would have been really, really bad for my business. And I was just trying to kill it every way I knew how. And I didn't know anything because I was a freshman. And finally, I let him get it all out. Basically, he told me, he said, you're new around here. You need to sit down, shut up. We're going to teach you how the legislative process works. And I said, well, Governor Dewhurst, that's great. I said, you guys agree to do these things on this transportation bill. I'll stand down and all that. And I said, unless this bill you're debating right now dies. And he said, well, what's it? And I said, well, this is my bill. This is my education bill. It's very important to me. And I want it to pass. And he said, well, what if it doesn't? And I said, well, then I'm going to walk to the other chamber and I'm going to shoot your bill in the head and we're all going to start over. Now, nobody told me at orientation I couldn't talk to the Lieutenant Governor like that. So I did it. So the chief of staff turns to me and he goes, oh my gosh, Ken, what do you want? And I said, well, I want this guy talking. And I didn't know his name at the time. I said, I want that guy to shut up and I want these 4 people to vote for my bill. And he said, done. I said, awesome. I didn't know it was this easy. Well, it really wasn't because I had to pay for that later. But that's the legislative process, at least the way I do it. And I've been fairly successful in the legislative process. And I guess that's why I keep doing this stuff. So let's talk about Smokehouse Creek Fire and my latest passion project. So you all, I don't know how many of y'all are from this area, but you probably saw it on the news in 2024, that largest wildfire in Texas history. These wildfires have been rampant since 2006. We've had 14 major fires, meaning 100,000 acres or more at a time. Since 2006, 85% of them start in the same spot. There's an old dilapidated stripper well oil field between Borger and Pampa, and that's where 85% of these fires start. So in 2024, I was out campaigning. I had a primary, and I was sitting in a constituent's office in Memphis. And Robin called me and she said, hey, this is serious this time. You better get home. I said, we burn down every year. It's never that serious. By the time I got home, we were evacuating. Robin and I, when we left our ranch, I had my pickup and a trailer and I had the horses and the dogs. She was behind me in her car with our worldly possessions she could load up. And we got caught in the fire. That fire had already come back over the top of Canadian and closed off all the roads. The only reason we got out is I'm an oilfield guy. I know every county road, back road there is in Hempfield County. And we went east toward Oklahoma and got out of the fire. We ended up at a friend's house south of town waiting to see what was going to happen. And the fire came there. We drove through 2 fires, spent the night in Elk City, Oklahoma. We got back to Canadian the next morning. Didn't know if we had a house. Fortunately, Robin is a very smart woman. She set our sprinkler system off on full blast before we evacuated. And I have a generator, so I didn't have to depend on utilities to keep my water well running. So our house survived, mainly because of that. All of our friends and neighbors all the way around us burned straight to the ground. And I'm telling you, I've been fighting these wildfires and leading the recovery efforts and doing what I can, every one of them since 2006. Never seen anything quite like this. So here's what you need to know about the wildfires and the way they work. Every time there's a wildfire, there's some things that happen. We have an unseasonably hot day. We have high winds. We have no humidity. Fire gets started. 100% of them are started with electricity. 85% of them are started in this oil field. We're going to get into that in just a minute. So the fire gets in the Canadian River breaks. And we can't put it out because there's no plowed fields up there. It's only part of the panhandle that's not flat as this table. So there's no plowed fields. It's hard to get around it. Well, the fire burns predominantly from the southwest, crosses the Canadian River. Somewhere in years past, there's a cold front waiting. It's usually in Oklahoma or in Kansas. This time, that fire jumped the river, got 5 miles north, the cold front hit. So it burned through Canadian, and then it blew back over the top of us and got the rest of it. 57 homes in our community of a town of 2,000 people. That's a lot of displaced folks, 57 homes. So immediately we suspended our campaign. We went to work. Robin was volunteering at the Relief Center and helping me. I was volunteering. I was delivering feed and hay and supplies. This is something that was a phenomenon about the fire. Even these ranches that survived, their home may have survived, their barn may have survived, for some reason, everybody's tractor burned down. So we have supplies coming in from 30 states and Canada. Nobody can unload it. So for about 14 days, we loaded up our Bobcat on a trailer and we just went over 4 counties unloading supplies. That's what we did for election day in my district. Oh, I'm sick of it. I'm absolutely sick of getting burned down every couple years and nobody ever does anything about it. So I asked the speaker at the time to give me a committee to investigate the Panhandle wildfires, and he did immediately. The House took the lead on this. The Senate actually didn't even respond, but the Texas House did. And I brought the Austin Circus to Pampa, Texas, because I didn't want another bureaucrat answer. I wanted to hear from the people that are living through these fires. What happens? Why are they coming? Why are they so frequent? And what's the implications? So we bring the Austin Circus to Pampa, and we had 3 days of hearings. Here's some of the things we learned during that hearing. Number one, the Smokehouse Creek fire was started by Xcel Energy. Xcel Energy's pole blew over. Now, Xcel Energy hired a company called Osmos to inspect their pole, the pole in question, in January of 2024. On February 9th, they told Xcel Energy that the pole was bad. They tagged it unsafe to climb. It did not say it needed replaced. It said unsafe to climb. On February 26th, it blew over, started the Smokehouse Creek fire. Now, so when I'm talking to Xcel at this hearing, I said, wow, why didn't you replace the pole? Well, we just hadn't got to it yet. Between April 2nd, the day or February 26th, the start of the fire, and April 2nd, when my hearing started, Xcel Energy had replaced 700 poles in that area. By May 1st, when my report was made public, they'd replaced 1,500 poles in that area. So it begs the question, if 1,500 poles needed replaced, how many more poles around the state of Texas needed replaced way before that, right? So that's number one. Number two, we learned we have a real deficiency with our volunteer firefighters from a funding and equipment standpoint. We had volunteer firefighters out there risking their lives to save not only our property and our home, but all our friends and neighbors that are out there fighting fire in T-shirts and blue jeans because they couldn't afford bunker gear. It's absolutely wrong. Firefighters are funded in 3 ways, and they're volunteer. Largely, they're funded by Fill the Boot. They're funded by a county budget, has a line item most of the time, and they're funded by something known as a 2604 grant that is administered by the Texas Forest Service. So the 2604 grant was so underfunded, there was $200 million of a backlog of 14 years to fund these volunteer fire departments. $22 million split over 1,800 departments that cover 89% of the state is no money when a fire truck's $1 million. That's why we had the backlog. The other problem we had, why it got so out of control, was firefighting aircraft. So Texas does not own firefighting aircraft. No state does. The federal government doesn't even own them. What the Fed does is they lease firefighting aircraft from private companies, and then they allocate them to states through contracts with the Bureau of Land Management or the Department of the Interior. That's what's going on. But this is how it worked. So back in 2017, this isn't the first 1 million acre fire we had. We had one in 17. In 19, I expanded the 2604 grant, and I expanded these federal contracts. So we would always have firefighting aircraft in the Panhandle or the South Plains in the Permian Basin, where the fires are. So I think, man, we're good. Well, Smokehouse Creek fire started. The judge from Gray County called me and said, "Where's our airplanes?" Actually, this was the fire before the big one started. So the fire starts on Tuesday. On Monday, Judge Porter calls me and says, "Where's our airplanes?" I said, "Well, they're in Childress or Dumas, where I put them." He goes, "Oh, no, they're not." I said, "What do you mean they're not?" He said, "We don't have any aircraft in the Panhandle. There's no firefighting aircraft in the state of Texas and that are available to us." So I called TDM. I said, "Where's our airplanes?" They said, "Oh, we forgot to tell anybody this, but some bureaucrat in D.C. decided that Texas doesn't catch on fire till mid-March, so all air assets have been shipped to the West Coast." Now, you didn't tell the county judges, you didn't tell anybody that we don't have an airplane. But this is how these contracts work. If your county's on fire, your judge has called the Forest Service to ask for air support. The Forest Service has to enable these contracts. So they call a bureaucrat in Alabama who decides if your fire's big enough to call a bureaucrat in Boise, Idaho, and that bureaucrat does a cost analysis, and that's the kind of airplane you get. This is such a ridiculous system. There is actually a firefighting aircraft company in Childress, Texas, who had their airplane sitting on the ground when we finally got through this federal contract mess because that bureaucrat in Idaho decided it was cheaper to get a plane in Colorado. We burned for 3 days waiting on an airplane. This is also something that I found very ridiculous. When we finally got airplanes, one of the things I did after the 2017 fires, when I put aircraft in the Panhandle, we put the fire retardant mixing tanks in Dumas and in Childress and in Canadian, strategically placed. Well, when the feds finally send us airplanes, they allocate the airplanes to Dumas, but they forgot to inspect that tank. So these geniuses are flying those airplanes from Dumas to Childress, because Childress didn't have airplanes, but they had a tank that had been inspected. They loaded up with the fire retardant stuff, fly it to the fire, but they're not allowed to refuel in Childress because they're home based in Dumas, so then they go back to Dumas. That's what they did to us. That's why we burned down and couldn't get a hold of this thing. We learned a lot during those hearings. From an oil field standpoint, where 85% of the fire starts, you can go up there to this old stripper well oil field and you will find fuse boxes that have 40 blown fuses on the ground. You'll find bare wires wrapped around a metal skid. And the people that own these wells don't put anything into them because, particularly at this price point, something making a half a barrel a day isn't going to make any money, so they don't maintain it. And it just has become this huge eyesore that the Railroad Commission was ignoring, because there's not enough money in the plug-in fund to plug this thing out. A lot of these wells are over 100 years old. Y'all been studying anything about a well bore? I don't know if y'all been doing any of that. The number one reason to get on an orphan well list is pipe integrity. Anybody believe that a 100-year-old oil well in an H2S field has any pipe in it? But those wells are very expensive to plug. So the Railroad Commission doesn't want to take responsibility for it. The power company is still keeping these things electrified. And so you get a high wind, you get a spark, you get a bare wire running through some scrub brush. 85% of the fires start right there. So I asked the Railroad Commission, I said, "Why are you allowing this to go on?" They said, "Well, we don't have any purview over the electric grid or any of that," which is a lie, by the way. The Railroad Commission, there was a statute passed in 1979 that gives the Railroad Commission carte blanche to regulate any part of an oil and gas operation they want to without further approval. They just don't want to do it. They don't want it on their plate. So I forced them to do a memorandum of understanding, an MOU, that says if a landowner reports an electrical hazard on an oil field location, the Railroad Commission has to call the PUC. PUC then calls the appropriate electric provider to sever power until the hazard's repaired. It's pretty simple. I made that a law this time because while I want to be able to prevent fires or put fires out, and I want all of our first responders to have everything they need, I really think the best idea is just don't start fires. So we made that a law. Today, if you report an electrical hazard on an oil and gas site, the Railroad Commission shall, remember this, folks, the two biggest words and most important words in the legislative process are shall and may. And if you want a bureaucrat to actually do what you intended them for him to do, you better say shall, because they're not going to do it if you give them a may. Railroad Commission shall contact PUC. PUC shall contact the electric provider and sever power. There's electric meters all over that part of our state that keep starting these fires that are being yanked today because of that law that I passed. We also, back on this pole thing, there's no pole inspection, no standardization in Texas. We have multiple utility companies that some of them inspect, some of them don't. They all do it different, and there's no reporting. Today, I passed House Bill 144 that requires all utilities and co-ops to inspect poles annually and report to the PUC. You can now get on the PUC website, find the poles on your property, and know when they've been maintained, when they're scheduled for maintenance, and on and on and on. Now, why is this so important? We didn't have these fires before 2006. Well, we have an aging infrastructure, and it's not just in the fires. We're fighting it with hurricanes and everything else. But here's the thing: back when the utility companies we allowed them to deregulate, and Bill, you probably caused that. Anyway, but when we allowed the utilities to deregulate, utilities get funded in two ways. Number one, they get funded by the rate you pay, all of us pay, and they get funded for infrastructure investment. They get a full return on investment if they build a big infrastructure project like a transfer center. But on maintenance, they only get the cost of the item. So if they go replace a pole, they get a return on the cost of the pole, but they don't get the labor. So every utility in the state, including XL, has gotten a habit for about 35 years now to adopt what they call a deferred maintenance program. They steal the money from the maintenance program to put it over here where they get the full return on investment. So consequently, our infrastructure is aging and aging and aging. That is not a function that's happening in the Panhandle. You go look at that mess in Houston at the last wildfire, or the mess the ice storms just created in Fort Worth, Dallas-Fort Worth. This is all infrastructure falling down around our ears. These poles need to be inspected. You know, I've identified 19 poles in Hemphill County alone that predate 1955. Those were pretty good trees, I guess, because these poles are still in use, never been inspected. We changed all that. They have to do it. We also, for a law from a bunch of oil and gas lawyers, this was probably something that's the most interesting to you, House Bill 145. House Bill 145 requires all co-ops and utilities to have on file at the PUC a wildfire mitigation plan. Now, why is that important? Because it is almost impossible to prove negligence in a court of law, and it is impossible to prove gross negligence. And I'm telling you right now, these utility companies and these oil and gas operators that aren't maintaining their sites, there's some gross negligence out there, but you can't prove it. Gross negligence is almost impossible. So the wildfire mitigation plan, basically from a law standpoint, says if there's one I not dotted, one T not crossed in this plan, and the plan wasn't followed 100%, gross negligence is on the table. That is a big deal, because if you want people to stop burning you down, get in their pocketbook. That's when they're going to clean up their act. So I passed that law too. Now, did any of this work? Well, we're going to find out probably in about 30 days how good we did. But I will tell you, in 2025, while I was changing the hearts and minds of the utility industry. The difference is in 2024, when we burned down, same time frame, same drought, same area, same wind, we had 80 electrical starts in the panhandle of Texas. Last year, while I was doing all of this, we had 6. I think we got somebody's attention. And we didn't burn down. Number one reason we didn't burn down is the first thing Xcel Energy did when the wind hit 25 miles an hour is they shut the power off to that old oil field. 85% of the fires are gone right there. So, you know, it's been a huge passion project for me. We did a number of things, other things besides that for disaster mitigation. You know, and back on this insurance kick. Oh, and I got to wrap it up. You told me to talk about it. So,
You want a question before you quit?
yeah, I'm going to tell you one more thing, and then I'm going to quit. Here's the deal. Disaster mitigation not only saves people and property. We're at a crossroads in this state where we can no longer afford property and casualty insurance. Texas has more disasters, natural and otherwise, than any other state. And we have one underwriter left in the state of Texas, so they're just gouging the hell out of all of us. We are not going to be able to afford it. We've got to get a hold of an aging infrastructure. We've got to take care of our first responders. If we're ever going to get a handle on this and lower insurance prices, you know, I also, just for fun, because I don't have enough to do, after the work on this wildfire stuff, we had the Hill Country flood, and the speaker passed a special rule to allow me to chair that committee as well. So when you're chairman of state affairs, you're not even allowed to serve on another committee. Now I chair the disaster preparedness and flood mitigation committee, along with Senator Perry, chairs that committee on the Senate side. That's interesting because a couple of flatlanders that live in a drought are chairing the flood committee. It was because of the work on the wildfire that we got tapped to do that. So we're going to continue down that road. I've got a lot of plans for next session. I know I talked too long, but if anybody's got a question for me, I'd be glad to answer.
Squeeze in one question before we wrap it up. Anybody got one ready to fire off?
Yes,
Yep.
sir.
The AG recently sued, I guess, Xcel Energy, or the company that caused the fire.
Uh-huh.
Do you have any insight on how that's likely to shake out, and if whatever direction it does shake out, what the legislative response to that might be?
Well, certainly, if he actually gets it done in any time frame, I expect that lawsuit, if it ever sees a courtroom, won't happen for 5 years, and he'll no longer be the attorney general one way or another. I don't have I can't really comment on the case because he's the lawyer for the state. I'm a state representative. I'm enjoined in the lawsuit. So I wish him well on his case. I think that all of these utility companies need to clean their act up. He's going to try to make it happen in a courtroom. I'm going to do it in the legislative process. And even though we only meet every 2 years, I guarantee I'm going to be faster.
If you guys have questions and you just didn't have time to ask, I would invite you to join us at my 2 o'clock Oil and Gas Law 2 class in room 106. We'll be there at 2 o'clock. And if you're available, come join us and ask questions then, or you can come down front and ask Representative King before we have to go off to lunch. But
if you come at 2 o'clock, I'll tell you about when I talked too long and Taylor Sheridan told me to shut up. That's a good story.
Yeah. So let's thank Representative Ken King for being with us today. Famous last words on that 20-minute thing, right? Yeah. That's usually how it works.
Well, when they started on the
Well, hey, that was great stuff. I didn't know any of that. I mean, that's a good story. Yeah, I mean, that's really that. You paint a good picture and you told it well. It was very efficient. Thank you. Come on down and say hi to these guys. Nice to see you. Hey.